Hello, I'm Tamara Calder Richardson, and welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. If you haven't seen my episodes, please watch. We have near-death experiencers, spiritually transformative experiencers, out-of-body OBE experiencers, as well as I've had UFO people on here that are research the UFO phenomenon and alien encounters, as well as other mysteries, and as well as like afterlife communication too. So we have a lot of interesting topics, and also the after effects of NDE. So I myself am a 6-time near-death experiencer and also an afterlife speaker and an evidential psychic medium and channeler. And I wanted to say, welcome to the Seeking Heaven channel. And if you haven't subscribed, like, and watch the videos, and please make comments. So let me get on to our guest tonight, who is so bubbly and so loving and has such a beautiful spirit. And before I bring them online, I want to tell you a little bit about them. And that would be Barbara Bartolome. Now, she is a 2-time near-death experiencer, but also a multiple spiritually transformative experiences. And we were having so much fun before the pre-show. I mean, guys, it was great. We were hearing all about all these stories and how that's normal for near-death experiencers to have this ongoing, amazing, almost like miracles. And you know, hopefully we'll have time that she can at least tell one of them. But she started years ago, I believe it was in 2008, the Ein Santa Barbara chapter, which is interesting. I actually met Barbara years ago at one of the Ein's chapter meetings, because I have one in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so she's built that up over 10 years, but you've also probably seen Barbara as well as on the NBC Today Show, US News, World Report, The Sun, which is in the UK. And she's been in multiple podcasts and other TV shows and articles. And you also may know her with the Anthony Chene, which she had a beautiful interview with him, the French director. And I'm going to bring her on, and she's really interesting. She's done so many things, and especially she was also involved with development of fundraising for the University of California. And then she had a paper art store, and you have 5 kids, and you're like a mom to everybody that you meet. So
That's right.
So welcome to being on the Seeking Heaven channel.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm so happy to be here with you. You are a bright light in this world.
Oh, geez, thank you.
Yep.
Wow, well, it's so nice to meet you.
Your heart is really easy to see. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, you know, it's really nice when you meet other people that are light workers, because you don't feel so alone, and you see other people that are secretly doing little things and helping people. And it's nice, you know, to know that we have a global community of a lot of beautiful people. Yeah. And that's the things that we need to focus on, not, you know, what does it mean? People suck. Is there a bumper sticker to that? But yeah, to focus on that, but focus on the beautiful things and the people that do care about other people. And you're one of them. So I appreciate it. I argued with Jesus coming back as he told me the mission. I'm like, you know, it's kind of a lot of work. It seems really hard. And he goes, he would have other people helping me. And so now I know you're one of them.
Yeah, I will be here anytime you want me, Tamara. I'll come to wherever you are. I'll be happy to help. You bet.
Well, I thank you so much. Well, we've had way too much fun in the pre-show, and there's so many stories that you have. I mean, Barbara, first of all, you're an amazing storyteller. Yeah. I've had so much fun listening to your stories. Some of these stories are like miracles, but they're funny and they're cute, and they should totally be a Lifetime movie. But I want to move into your near-death experience. You've had 2, so wherever you want to interject the near-death experiences, and then we'll break away and go into maybe some of your, I know you've done some, you have so many spiritual stories and experiences. And people, that's the thing about when, you know, I created this show, I didn't realize, but I was being very protective and mama bear over everybody, because as near-death experience, we're not just that moment in time, but the divine keeps working through us just like it does everybody. Maybe we're just more cognizant. It does that with everybody. but to hear these stories, I think is encouraging. So the NDE, you can say whatever part that you want to know. You had a couple, and one is more memorable than the other. So wherever you want to start with that.
Yeah, so the background history on that was that I was 31 years old. I had been raised in Salem, Oregon, and I had moved down to Santa Barbara, California when I met a person up in the Oregon area and fell in love with him, and he wanted me to move to Santa Barbara to be married. So I did that, and I was young, and I had been married before, so I had had a short marriage, and I had a son, and we moved and uplifted ourselves to Santa Barbara, and got married down here pretty quickly after we got here, and then kind of started seeing why I shouldn't have done it. The person had anger issues, I think, from maybe childhood, and I was kind of struggling trying to help him make changes to his life, and trying to help him choose not to hit me and not to hit my son, and I was trying to do everything I could to keep it all together, and it turned out that I left him for a year, and he pleaded and begged me to come back with him and said that he'd had counseling, and I fell for it, and I believed him, and I ended up moving back in, and I got pregnant. And that little girl was born in July of 1987. So I had a little strawberry blonde redhead, and she was so adorable. And about a month after she was born, I had had a problem pregnancy, and I was on bed rest for most of it. And I was called by my husband out onto our patio. And when I got outside, I saw that he had a 2x4, and he had it propped underneath some bags of cement that had a couple of pieces of wood underneath them to keep them off of the level of the deck. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, doesn't matter, come over here. And I said, what are you doing? And I felt a little bit scared of him at times, because I kind of worried about his focus of maybe possibly that I might be worth something more dead than alive. And I was very heavily insured at the time, and I kind of had that in the background of my thoughts of I need to be careful with him. He'd done some other things that had hurt me pretty badly. So what ended up happening was that he pulled me by the arm underneath the 2x4, and he removed his own shoulder from it, and the weight of the 5 or 6 bags of cement came down upon my shoulder and blew a disc out of my lower back. And I crumpled to the ground, and I couldn't walk, and I went to doctors, and the first doctor said that I would never walk again. And then I went to another doctor who was a neurosurgeon, and he ended up saying that he could fix it. It was about 5 months after the initial injury, and so he scheduled the surgery. And prior to the surgery, he wanted me to go into the hospital the night before to have one final test done on my back, and it was called a myelogram, where they inject iodine dye into your spinal cord, and then they have you on an x-ray table that moves, and they tip the table so that the dye will run down your spinal cord, and then they'll be able to see the area where the disc blew to see if any of the fragments of the disc chipped my spinal cord, and I'm leaking that dye that they had put in there. So they started the whole procedure. I wasn't worried. This for me was just one of the other, I'd had x-rays and MRIs and CAT scans, and this is just one of the other tests that I had to do. So they injected the iodine dye right into the back of my neck, right back here. And then they had me on the x-ray table. The orthopedic surgeon that was going to be doing the surgery with the neurosurgeon the next day was present in the room, as was the neurosurgeon. And then there were 2 x-ray tech guys that were in the room, and then 1 female nurse. So they started tipping the table, and unfortunately the x-ray tech that was had his finger on the button, started talking to the other X-ray tech who was monitoring the monitor, and they were just chatting back and forth, and he didn't realize, the guy who was pushing the button didn't realize he was lowering my head instead of raising it. So he was tipping the table the wrong way, had his finger on the wrong button. So I began feeling really funny, and almost immediately when the table started moving, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I'm supposed to feel kind of goofy like this. This is weird. I'm not sure if this is okay. And I didn't want to interrupt them. And I couldn't see the doctors because his body was kind of blocking my vision of the two doctors in the room and the nurse. And so I kind of just laid there too long. And by the time I realized I should say something to these guys and interrupt them, I couldn't speak. I couldn't reach my hand out to touch him. I started panicking. My head was very, very, just felt like I was going to pass out. And I was scared. And then I realized that my eyes were rolling to the back of my head, and I was trying really hard to keep my eyes forward, and I was concentrating on that, and I was concentrating on, somebody notice me. Nobody was noticing me. And so what ended up happening was I started hyperventilating, the very last thing right before I died, and I was breathing really fast, and that's what they heard. And they then stopped their talking, the two guys, and the guy that was pushing the button leaned over my face, saw my eyes were rolling backwards, saw me hyperventilating, and realized something was wrong. And he leaned back and looked to where his thumb was on the side of the machine, and then he made this look like, oh God. And so I died. I literally shut my eyes in my body, and then the next moment,
when your head went back the other way instead of the right way, did whatever chemicals they went straight to your head?
Exactly. And another neurosurgeon years later told me that it would have changed the pressure inside my brain and caused malfunctions for my body. So that's why I started hyperventilating. That's why my eyes were rolling backwards. And then it was so bad, and I'd been tipped for too long, and the dye was all the way into my spine, into my brain from my spine, that I died. So it was just simply panic in the body and feeling scared and, oh my gosh, and then shut my eyes and then opened my eyes, and I was way up above on the ceiling, looking down at my body, looking at the tops of their heads, and I was completely calm. I felt like I was wrapped in this beautifully warm blanket, and I looked down and I said, if I'm up here and my body is down there, and he's calling code blue, I think I just died.
Oopsie.
Yeah, there was no like, oh my God! There was nothing scary about it at all. And immediately, I realized that there was someone there with me. Now, people always say, well, did you look to see? No, I didn't look, because the feeling that that person was, that person, it's not a person, the being was giving me, was this amazing connection with me throughout my whole life. I literally felt as though it was God. God had always been present as far as I was concerned since I was young. And I, wasn't particularly religious, but I knew God. Now, I didn't know why that was like that in my life, but there's something that happened later in my life that I realized now that's why I realized God was present in my whole life. So I began talking to him in my head, so just my thoughts, and I was watching everything that was happening down below, and they were calling, the two doctors were calling out things. It was a big mess. It just sounded too loud and obnoxious. I didn't actually like it. It just was crazy down below, and so I was talking calmly, and I said, basically, I need to go back into my life. If I leave my children in this way, because I had, my son was 8 and my daughter was 5 months old, and so I said, if I leave my children in this way, at this time, they won't grow up to be the good human beings that they are capable of being. Because I realized that without me being there to protect these children against these outbursts that my husband would do, that they would then be traumatized and that they would suffer throughout their childhood, beyond into their teens, and etc. So I said, I need to go back to be helping them. I need to be there for them. I need to go back and be in my life. And I was very calm. And so as I was saying that, all this stuff was happening down below. They got an oxygen cart in the room. The lady that was the nurse was calling for the defib unit, yelling stat, and it never came in. And when the oxygen cart came in, the two x-ray techs stopped blowing into my mouth. They were just doing chest compressions then. Both of them were switching off every 2 minutes or so. And then this man came into the room, and he had this box, and he walked around the end of my feet and went between the table and the wall, and he laid the box on the shelf that was on the wall. And he then started peeling off these white things, and he was putting them on my chest. And up above, I was talking to God, and I was watching everything, and I didn't understand what he was doing. And so I stopped asking to go back, and I said to God, what is that he's doing? I understand everything else. What's he doing? And I was then transported and moved from up on the ceiling directly above my body looking down to right in front of the box, which was on the wall, and my body was behind it, and the wall was on the other side of it.
Okay.
And the guy stopped putting the things on my chest, and he reached over right in front of me like this, and he put his hand over and he flicked a toggle switch on the box. And then this light lit up in this long area at the top of the box that was a glass screen, and it was going in a straight line. I didn't know what it was. I don't watch TV very much. I didn't know it was a flat line. And so I was watching my flat line, and little thing was going, it was making this monotone sound, beep. And I'm watching it, and it stopped, and it went over and started again, and it was making the flat line again. I didn't know what it was. And then the third time it started to go across, about a third of the way over, all of a sudden I went, oh, that's a flat line. That means my heart's not working. Oh. And the minute that I said that, I was back up on the ceiling again. The being was right next to me again, and I was looking down at everything. And I continued to ask to go back calmly. So I was kind of put down there until I figured it out, and then when I figured it out and I said that, then I was back up with him again. So the doctors were doing all this stuff, yelling, and all this stuff was going on. And then the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, they were still standing back, not really doing anything. They were ordering everybody else to do everything. And the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something.
Ooh.
The orthopedic surgeon says, stand clear. And the guys that were doing the chest compressions and the nurse that was kind of towards the front of the head of the bed, she steps back, and he takes 2 steps forward, takes his fist from behind his back and just arches it over his head and just slams it into my chest.
Oh my God.
I watched that from above, and I watched my body kind of react to that, but my eyes are still shut in my body, and I am up there. And so then the being that I'd been talking to finally spoke to me. And this beautiful voice that I could never imitate ever well enough said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then I saw all these little film clips that just went clip, 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 clip. And I saw all of these incidents that had happened during the marriage that were abusive. All of the hitting, all of the shoving, all of the pushing, all of the kicking, all of the yelling at me, all of the degrading me, all of the. And I saw all those little things. And then I evaluated all of the things that I had done to try to make changes to him from day 15 into our marriage to the time that we were right then there. And I thought about the marriage family therapist I took him to that he rejected. The pastor of the church that I took him to, he rejected. The times that I cried, I begged, I pleaded, I wrote letters. I wrote everything that I had done to really try to get him to stop. It never worked. And I came to that realization up there on the ceiling, and I said, if you let me go back, I promise you, I'll get strong enough to leave him.
Oh, wow.
Because that's really what had happened. I'd gotten really weak in my whole overall personality, in that I was trying so hard to please him and keep the marriage together and help him to get beyond this, that I had really weakened my whole persona, and I was afraid of leaving him and letting him go on and do this to someone else. And I just was, just too many things were scaring me. So when I said that, I said the word, leave him, the doctor at that moment struck me in the chest again, did a second precardial thump. It's done to restart your heart in situations where they don't have a defib unit, and it's their last-ditch effort, and it hardly ever works. Every doctor that you ever ask a question to will say, long shot that it will work. Well, that second strike restarted my heart, and I literally just simply shut my eyes up above and opened them a second later, and I was back in my body. His fist was right there on my chest, and he was just an arm's length away, and I looked at, through the oxygen mask, I looked up at him, and I said, what just happened, into the oxygen mask? And he looked at me, and the nurse leaned over me and said, stop, don't talk, we need to stabilize you. And he was kind of shocked that I spoke and that I was back again. And so then he stepped back, and they were doing everything that they needed to stabilize me over the next 20 minutes. And he and the other doctor stayed in the room. And then when they took the oxygen mask off, I said, what just, excuse me, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling, and I could see and hear everything that you were doing to resuscitate me. The neurosurgeon, he goes, oh, brother. But I was 31 years old. I'd never heard of a near-death experience. I wasn't a meditator. I didn't know about leaving your body. I was a mom dealing with an abusive husband, working full-time and supporting and trying to keep 2 children safe. I did a lot of volunteer work around my community too, on top of that, to try to help others. So I had no idea that a near-death experience was possible. So I then blurted out, no, I was up on the ceiling, and I could see and hear all of you. And she had the oxygen card, and she brought that in, and she was on the phone saying stat and calling for the defib unit, and that man brought in the heart monitor, and I watched it flatlining, and you guys were doing CPR and blowing in my mouth before the oxygen card came in, and then you stopped, and you were just switching turns doing the chest compressions. And the doctor that was the neurosurgeon was standing right next to me. He clenched his fist like this next to his body, and he had him up like this, and he went, I am not going to stop and stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out of the room.
Why do you think he did that? Because he was mad you were nailing right to him.
Yeah, and I don't even know if he'd ever heard of a near-death experience, or if he'd ever had a patient relate that stuff, but I was...
Frightened him?
Oh, I frightened him for sure. There's no doubt. So then the orthopedic surgeon was much kinder, took my hand, and he said, what did you see? How did you feel? Can you tell me again what was said? And where people were standing? And, he kind of validated it all in front of everybody else. And then they put me on a gurney, and they sent me up to my room, and they did the surgery the next day, which was a laminectomy, discectomy, to repair they never actually got the myelogram results, but they repaired my blown out disc, and they cleaned up all the fragments. And then I was in the recovery area, and both the doctors were walking towards me. I'd come out of the anesthesia, and I said, tell me what happened last night when we had that test. What was that? What happened? And the orthopedic surgeon didn't say anything, but the neurosurgeon went like this and put his hand right, I've got to find where it is, okay, right in front of my face like that. And he goes, I am not here to talk about that. I am here to tell you that your surgery was successful. And he went into all the stuff. Well, then my current husband back then came to visit in the hospital and brought my baby daughter and my son. And when I told him what happened that evening when he visited, he said, "Oh, that couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated it." Well, I'm not a drinker and I've never been. I was exposed to a stepfather that was alcoholic when I was in my teen years. And I actually chose, before I was 21 years old, to not drink alcohol. I also chose very early in my early teen years never to do drugs. So I never even did marijuana. I did nothing. It was those 70s when everybody else was out there having fun, and I'd maybe go to a kegger, but I didn't drink anything. I was the designated driver. So I knew also that I had had a security clearance with the Department of Defense in one of my positions that I'd worked at. And I had a secret clearance, which means they go through your history and your background with a fine-tooth comb. And I had nothing that would ever indicate that I had hallucinations. So that just caused me to never talk about it again. I literally closed that box up, put it inside me, and I didn't speak about it anymore. It was probably about 12 years later, when my little daughter was about 12, I was at a gymnastics practice with her, and a nurse was sitting next to me that was another mom, and she was talking to me about the impending death of her mom. Her mom had been sick, and it was just about the end of the mom's life. And she was very grieving, and I could tell that. And I knew that what that near-death experience, I didn't even know it was called the near-death experience at that time, but I knew yeah. Yeah, I had no idea what it was called or that anybody else had ever had one. I was like, there was no internet, so I didn't know. And so I said to her, there's something I can tell you that happened to me that might make you feel differently about death, because it makes me feel differently about death. Do you want to talk about that? And she said, yes, of course. So I told her what had happened, and she said, Barbara, that's called a near-death experience. And we actually, as nurses, we see more of the patients that have had those. They will disclose them to us rather than the doctors, because they're afraid of what the doctors will think.
Oh, okay.
So she's the one who gave me the word near-death experience, the term of it. And then she said, go online. There's a lot of information about it. Well, I'd never known. And by that time, the internet had come up. And so I went online and I started researching. I found the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, which Dr. Jeffrey Long runs and founded. And I ended up getting my bravery up. And maybe months later, I started writing up what my near-death experience was about briefly. And I submitted it to his website. And about 2 years later, he called me and he said that Discovery Channel wanted to, do a big show on near-death experiences, and they had chosen my experience as one of the ones they wanted to profile. Well, that didn't end up happening because my orthopedic surgeon basically said, I'll on camera admit that she had a near-death experience, but the Discovery Channel director told me that he said, I can't talk about it in any way because my colleagues and my own patients will not trust me in the future if I do something like that. So, yeah.
I'm curious. What year was that?
Well, I had the NDE in December of 1987, December 7th, 1987.
Okay. So when did the book Life After Life? I've got a picture here of you and Dr. Raymond Moody, and I know he, helped. He coined the term near-death experience, and I'm trying. That was, that's why. I'm about this, but back then you couldn't. It was not accepted.
No, he wrote the book in the mid-1980s, so the book was probably kind of new when I had my experience, but I wasn't connected to anybody who would have mentioned those or even read the book, or I didn't watch TV, so I didn't know anything about him, and it took 12 years before it opened up, and it was the nurse that helped me with that, and so that was really life-changing.
And real quick, Dr. Raymond Moody's book, when that came out, it wasn't accepted right off.
I believe it.
through a lot with his research being ignored by the medical community. Now we think, oh, isn't it great? But he went through a lot of hardship to get that out. So even if you did have it, it wasn't per se the most credible thing like it is now.
No, I'm sure the doctors discredited it completely. Yeah.
They're probably fearful because now what is it? You're merging spirituality with science. And of course, we see more and more of that every day because they have the technology to bring people back.
Exactly.
Coming back, right?
Exactly.
Wow. So, yeah, so it wasn't really safe for people to talk about it. And it's still, even if someone had it now, you still have family and people and friends or their career that they're a little nervous about speaking about this because they don't want to be evaluated. There's parts of my NDE I have not said because I'm going to say afraid. That's not a good word. I don't want it to be evaluated because I feel it's sacred.
Judged, yeah.
Yeah. So after this, so you went on, so you had two. Was it something you remembered in the past, or this other one was this afterwards?
No, so I didn't talk about it with my family. I didn't tell my siblings. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my mom. I just kept it in the box. And my dad and mom, by the time, 12 years had passed when I found out it was an NDE, they had already died. And what happened was that I was going to be going up to Oregon, and I was going to see an older brother who's 10 years older than me, and we were going to dinner, and my husband was standing next to me. By the way, I did get divorced. Yay, thank God. And I did find a wonderful guy who is super supportive and loving and kind and gentle and wonderful, and also 7 feet tall.
Oh, yeah, I got a picture, you guys. You mind if I show it? Can I show it?
Yes, of course.
I know he's the love of your life. When I met Barbara, and we were going to, it was at the Orlando conference, I think 6 years ago, and you walked in and you were busy doing something, helping with something, and then I saw this huge guy with you, and he's like, how tall?
7 foot.
I mean, that's crazy. And you're pretty tall. You're 5'9" yourself.
I'm 5'9", but I'm, quite a bit smaller than him. And yeah, and he came into my life, and I actually, it's one of my amazing stories that I tell of how I got him in my life. But I'll bypass that one at this point. But
how did you finally get rid of this? I mean, I know he might be seeing this. I doubt it, but so how did that happen? I mean, how did you?
I waited until
you were going to get the break.
left to go on a business trip, and then I found an apartment, and I moved my children and I filed a restraining order against him, and I had a female lawyer that fought very heartily for me, and she got me away. And I then, was afraid of guys. I was like, okay, that's really scary. I've been married twice, and both guys were really zeros, and I don't know how to find a nice guy. And how does that work with finding the right guy or the right job or the right place to live or whatever? I did really amazingly, and no one told me. I didn't read any books about it. I just did it naturally. I think it was just a gift from the other side, but it sure worked out well.
Right, so, how to manifest. And that was very smart of you, because I'm just trying to remember, you said with your NDE, well, if I come back as your children, you said, I'm going to get stronger. And so you did. You decided when he left, you went for it.
I went on a business trip.
Oh, you did get stronger.
To the airport, and then I turned around and I started interviewing. I went out and found an apartment, and then I moved everything. And by the time he came back from his business trip, I was gone, and I was safe, and I was, protected by the police by then. So yeah, I was
very impressed, because I don't want to leave that part out. There's so many women that are not, I have a lot of women, a lot of men watch too, but in this case, women that might
be reversed. It can be the abusive woman, and it could be a guy who's being, yeah. So it happens in that situation too. I'm not saying that it's always a man. So yeah,
that's true. And I think it's even more taboo when it's a man being verbally or physically abused by the wife, because they want to not tell anyone. They don't know how to mention it. But I have I've heard of a couple incidences where that's true too. Mm-hmm. So now you're free. And so far as there any more the NDEs you want to cover today, or you can go into your spiritually transformed? I mean, there's so many, you have so many stories.
So what ended up happening was my brother ended up after our dinner together, and his wife was talking to his daughter, and my husband was standing next to me, and he said, "Hey, Barb, there's something that I need to tell you that I should have told you a long time ago, but the parents told us not to talk about it because I have 3 older siblings that knew and saw this situation." And he said, when you were young, when you were about 18 months old, he said you had a very high fever, you were sick. He said, I don't remember what it was that you had, but you went into convulsions and you stopped breathing. And he didn't know about my one at age 31. So here he is telling me that I died at 18 months old. And I'm going, what? And my husband's like, and so then he says, yeah. And he said, so Dad called the fire department, which was like 911 back then in 1958. And he said they told my dad to tell my mom to put me into tepid bath water, to submerge up to my neck in tepid bath water so that it would kind of cool down my body from the high temperature that I was at, but not to put me into cold water, because that will cause the body to go into shock and it can actually stop the heart. So they were supposed to add ice cubes slowly until the ambulance came. So tepid bath water, add ice cubes slowly. Well, we only had 1 tray of ice cubes, so my mom said to my older brothers in a panic, go next door and get as much ice as you can. So they left and went to the neighbors' houses, and one went one way and one went the other way, and my older brother came back first with the bag of ice, and he handed it to my mom in the bathroom. She started to add the ice cubes, and while he was watching me, he said I was purple, and I had lost all color of red. I was purple. I was lifeless, and my mom was holding me with one hand and adding the ice cubes slowly with the other hand, and crying and sobbing over the top of the bathtub. And he said, all of a sudden, you came back to life. You arched your back, and you took in a breath, and you went, ah! And then you went, ah, ah, ah. And he said, then you sat there and cried and cried and cried. And he said, but you turned from purple to red, which is what you were before you died and before so many minutes had passed.
What was the temperature of?
What was the what?
What was the temperature from?
He doesn't remember why I was sick. He was like 12 years old, and I was like 18 months old. So he doesn't remember if I was the flu or measles, or he has no concept.
You know what's really weird? Because we don't know this. The same thing happened to me when I was 5 and got pneumonia. They put me in the bathtub, but they put all my ice cubes in on top. It was horrible.
No.
I still remember that bathtub thing. It was horrible.
It could have killed you. That's really crazy.
It did, but
Of course.
Whoopsie. Not immediately. I was kind of, not so good anyway. They had to drive me. But yeah, they told them, I guess they went on the phone, the hospital, they didn't have emergency, whatever, center, but it was the same thing. And you didn't even know that. Yeah, I went through the ice thing, but they had plenty of ice. They just kind of dumped the whole thing in at one time. It was very shocking. Yeah. So interesting. And I will say this, people watching, if you had a really high fever when you were a kid, or you're having because I used to have kind of missing time in an area, like dark moment, not dark like scary, but dark as in I don't remember.
Yeah.
It could be there are people that get older, grown, and they had a near-death experience, but they don't remember it. It's actually kind of common, don't you think?
I didn't know that had ever happened, but once he told me about that, and I was over the shock, and my husband was over the shock, I started looking backwards in my life, because my mom always used to say, here I was a redhead, and I was born on the 4th of July, and I was her firecracker. Well, she also told me that I was the black sheep of the family. And I never understood why she would say that to me. And she'd always say that I was so different than the rest of the children. Well, a lot of the things that I did as a young person were things for others. So there's an elderly couple that lived down the street, couple of elderly couples. I was the only kid in the neighborhood, would go over and pick a couple flowers as I walked over to their house, knock on their door, and go in and sit in their living room and talk to them. I was like 5 years old. No one else even thought of doing that. I would go and do that at 5 years old. And I remember, did you? Oh my God.
I didn't do the flowers, but I was a weird kid. I don't really admit this. We don't know this about one.
You
I
don't know.
don't admit
Talk if you did it too. Oh my God.
But you know what I did? There was a lady I didn't understand. She was an alcoholic. So I was 5. I didn't understand those things. And I would go, and I think at this point I wasn't 5. I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade. But anyway, I would go across the street and visit her. I knew she was lonely and depressed. So I would go every day at 4 o'clock and watch My Favorite Martian. And then I would go visit this lady, and she was very depressed in the apartment place. And she was an well, I guess stripper. And she had these pictures of Dean Martin, like, she goes, "That used to be so beautiful. Look at me, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, okay. And she was so proud of her round bed. I didn't know that she was like, I think she's a prostitute. Like, I didn't know. I was a little kid, but I was
we don't know that stuff back then, yeah.
But I was worried that she was depressed. So I would do that. My mom never knew I was visiting all these strange people trying to help them. So you did that too. Interesting.
The thing. And then this one time when I was like 5 and my little sister was 3 and we were holding my mom's hand. My mom was really a structured. We had 5 kids and she was a structured woman. She ended up becoming a police officer when I was in my teen years. She carried a Smith & Wesson 38 caliber semi-automatic in her purse and handcuffs. And she always used to like, "Don't you ever do anything bad because I will," you know. And I'd be like, "Don't worry, I will do it." You know? But when I was 5 and my little sister was 3, we were hanging on to her hands. We're a street corner in Salem. And all of a sudden, I did the thing you never do. I broke grip with my mom and I put my hands over my face and I was hiding behind my hands. And my mom, no nonsensing, says, "What do you think you're doing?" And I look through my hands and say, "They're going to crash." And 20 seconds later, this car comes barreling through the intersection and T-bones a car that's in the intersection like 20 feet in front of us. And there's this big crash and oh my gosh, and my mom let go of my little 3-year-old sister's hand, took both of my shoulders, looked me in the face, and she got down on one knee and she said, "Don't you ever tell anyone you can do that. Don't you ever talk about that." And so I was like, I didn't, I knew that I was supposed to hide a whole lot of stuff that I'd get, feelings, or I'd get, oh my gosh, I'd win all the time. And it was all these different amazing things that I kind of felt God was always with me and I was always protected and I could always count on him and I never worried. And I always, helped people and did all the things all these amazing things happened to me. I never questioned it. But once that second NDE came up, I realized, oh, okay. Because after my second NDE, I became even more like that. And so I realized, wow, that goes all the way back to my earliest childhood memories of who I was. I was like that early on because of that first situation.
So you probably didn't know you were a unicorn.
No, I didn't.
You probably didn't know that because that's who you were, right?
Yeah, and so and people, my friends and stuff, would be like, like a couple times when I did tell them that something was going to happen, they were freaked out about it, and they didn't like that, and I had to then, kind of explain it away. I don't know. I just, I don't know how I knew that. I just knew that was going to happen. I'm like, okay, I'm never going to say that again. I'm not going to tell anybody what happened and so what was going to happen. And so it was interesting. But I never was in like a medium where I could see what other people's lives were going to be like. I'm not like you where I can do that, but there's all these experiences that have happened in my own life where I've gotten communication from the other side to make a difference in the situation that was occurring. And those I always am grateful for and say thank you so much for being a part of my life, my existence, and I appreciate you, whoever it is that's over there, whether it being God or whether it being one of his helpers or whether it being Jesus. I don't ask who it is. I always just say thank you.
It's a big team. It's a big operation over there. We got a lot of people helping us. Angels guys, there's a lot going on, and they know exactly. So, did you ever try to warn someone of a premonition or anything? Did it work?
Yes.
It didn't work.
Well, what happened was that I blinked my eyes really fast, and for some reason, I saw that something was going to happen, and I told the person that it was going to happen to, you know, hey, the cops are coming to this kegger that we're at, and they're going to arrest everybody. They're on their way. They're coming down the driveway to the house right now. We need to run off into the bushes to hide. And what it was actually, I told them after we ran off in the bushes. I just in the moment I just dragged them off in the bushes after I opened my eyes and I saw the cops coming. So I dragged them off in the bushes. The cops came. They arrested all these underage people. I wasn't drinking, so I wasn't in danger. I could be there, and I wasn't drinking, so it wasn't a problem to me. Although if my mom found out I was at a kegger, she probably would have been mad. But my friends had been drinking, so I was saving them. So after the cops left and all the paddy wagon left and everybody, all the party was gone, and we came out of the bushes and we were walking towards their car, and I was going to drive them home. And that's when they said, you know, how did you know that they were coming? And I ended up telling them, I don't know why, but my eyes, I just kind of blinked my eyes really fast and I saw them coming towards the house. I don't know how it works, but that's happened. And then actually it was a really negative thing because one of the girls went to school the following Monday and told everybody I was a witch and started spreading around the high school that I was a witch. And I had to do, you know, all sorts of damage control, and I had to tell her, I'm sorry, if you don't stop saying this, I cannot be your friend anymore. And we lost our friendship because of her, you know, doing that. She didn't understand how I could have seen that the cops were coming, and I didn't understand it myself, but I saved her, but she wasn't grateful, and so it was a bad situation.
Do you know that is that's very sad, and actually that's come up with quite a few people that are near-death experience. I was a lady in particular. I'm thinking of just a couple months ago. A lot of people don't admit. You'll see psychic or medium, but they're NDErs too.
Yeah.
And said that she was called that a couple times. One by a family member. I was called once by my family member. One of my family members said I was stoned in the schoolyard. I said, yeah, we went to a new school and somebody kept throwing rocks at me. And they said, oh, it's because you're a witch and that's why. And I went, oh my God, that's horrible. I think I'm like, not whatever that, I mean, it was meant negative, you know,
Yeah.
I'm like, not that. You can't help how you're made. And so, I was always helping people. I was very hurtful. So, and it's back to fear, you know, that was you know, yeah, they're not going to burn us at the stake these days.
Back then, no NDEs were being talked about in the public and the press, and you know, there wasn't any way to, even when I was a child, to even know that I even had one. So that was before I had my second one. Of course, I was only a senior in high school when that happened. So yeah, it was, you know, I learned to stop talking about what was going to happen and let the, you know, course of the situation occur, because I couldn't risk being called out for it and, you know, being disassociated from people, losing friendships or whatever. Unless it was going to be something that caused someone to die, then I probably wouldn't have mentioned it. You know, if it was something that wasn't going to be a big problem, it's going to happen.
I think it's two things. I think, and people listening, I know people listening, somebody listening, more than one, this has happened to, and it happens for two reasons. Number one, people are fearful of things they don't understand. Okay. The second is people are jealous. People are jealous. They want that. And like, I've had people be like jealous, and I'm like, do you understand like what I had to be me? I was always been this. So like I had to hide it forever. And then I had to deal with things I didn't understand because I didn't have anyone to talk to.
Exactly.
So it's in a picnic, and they don't understand that, but it's primarily jealousy. So it's very hurtful. And then these are things you get older and then you remember, but I've heard quite a few people mention this, that people have said things like that. So I always tried to blend in myself. Now I'm older and I don't care. This is the world I live in, and I try to support people. Look, if this is how you're made and how God wants you to perceive the world, God doesn't make mistakes.
That's right. That's just what I feel too. It's now I don't really care. I can give the gift of me telling my stories, and if you get something from it, then I've blessed you and I've given you a gift. But if you don't get anything from it, then just forget it and go on, move on. It doesn't matter. And maybe somebody else's story will touch your heart and you'll understand more. But it's just my job to give it, and then it doesn't matter whether anybody gets it or not. I'm supposed to give it. Yeah.
And I think the meanest thing about that too, you could have said witch, you could have said gay, you could have said whatever. It's mean. It's mean-spirited. We shouldn't label people. We don't like being labeled, and we shouldn't label people, and it stops our growth. It stops the other person's growth. And we've been so many things, and I think the labeling is a way for people to control others, to put them in a box. And we're still back to that jealousy thing, but I think it's so important to remember this is why you can have discernment. Yeah, you don't want to hang out with scary people or whatever, but it's important to not judge, because you don't know what that person's gone through. You don't know who they are. You don't know what kind of life they're trying to walk. Yeah. I mean, I wish people would be more kind and a little bit more reserved. What is the whole count to 10 before you say something? Because people will say things like on the social media that are just horribly hurtful. Like, why would you say mean things to someone? And some of the people know each other. Like, what would you say? I mean, even if whether you knew them or you didn't, why do people say cruel things like this?
Do something positive with your words and your life instead, because all of the things that all of our near-death experiencers talk about, what do we talk about? A life review at the end. Not someone judging us, not a table of people saying, you did bad. Not that. But us looking at our own life and all the things that we did, all the interactions that we created and had, and seeing all of the good things that we were able to put out there in the world and all the things that we could have done better on, and looking at our own lives and saying, wow, I could have done better there. And, oh, wow, did you see how I touched his life? Yeah, so I really feel that, the whole point of being here is to just do something good, even if it's a smile to someone that you're opening the door for, or paying for somebody's coffee in front of you, when you're standing in line, or, whatever you can do that you can afford to do in your life. And it all comes back to you as it just blesses you way more than it blesses anybody else, all the things that you do to contribute.
That is so true. It's the little things, even just a smile, because you don't even know, just really acknowledging that person. You'll even notice it when you go to a restaurant and you say, thank you. And they're sometimes they'll just hang around because they're just like so shocked someone's saying thank you or being nice. So I think it goes back to just having kindness and humility and grace and compassion toward others, and the simple things that, like, I guess our grandparents taught us that they're not in vogue anymore, but they are in vogue. Wherever you are in the world, kindness always counts and is appreciated. So going back about that, one thing I do want to make one quick point, and then I have a question for you. With the near-death experiencers, so many they come back with some kind of after effect, whether it's psychic, medium, both. Some people can count numbers, like Rain Man kind of numbers. Some people can play musical instruments. I mean, who knows? Some people have premonitions. There's so many variants of that. It could be that whatever they see, auras, whatever it may, angels, whatever it may be. And this is actually a very common thing. But to me, it's our natural way as being spirit. We are spirit. So this is our natural way of understanding things telepathically and understanding things in this way. Now, I know that we've got just a few minutes left, but tell us where you are right now, and here you've had to keep things quiet to yourself, even as a child, and abilities, and even with the NDE, and you try to tell the doctor that didn't go over too well. now here you are. Is there what have you learned spiritually that if you had like 3 things you wanted to tell someone and say, what have you learned so far? What would it be?
Well, we talked about the kindness to others and not judging people, and to just extend your hand in any way that you have the capacity to do so. How that blesses you. So that when you start doing that and build yourself into that type of a person where you just say something kind to somebody, or you smile, or you just be happy and you just give them a little bit of light, then that's a different life completely. That's an incredibly beautiful life, and I live it all the time, and I have lots of fun with that. So the other thing I think that is important to understand is that we do exist past our point of death. That it's a really beautiful home that we get to go to. And I call it home rather than heaven or hell because of the non-judgment, that I don't feel there was any judgment whatsoever. It was total acceptance when I was out of my body. And I'm not a perfect person, and no one is. And so I know that we are completely accepted as we are when we cross over, and we're completely loved. And so knowing that takes away the fear of, the whole thing. Of course, I don't want to like lay in bed for months and have tubes in me, but I literally have had experiences where I have helped others in dangerous situations, and didn't think a thing about my own safety in those moments, and very dangerous situations where I could have died in the moment. But for me, it was giving that help to those people that needed it in that moment, and it blesses me in the long run. So I would say that just being the good person that you were born to be, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what money you have, no matter what resources you have, no matter what work you do, there is always, every day, a way to touch someone sweet, someone nicely, someone kindly, someone, in just some gentle way, to be kind and loving. So find those ways, learn to encourage that in your life, and it is going to change your whole outlook, your aspect, and everything of how you feel about why you're here. And that's, sometimes it's a big purpose, and sometimes it's little ones like that. So
Okay.
that's alive.
This is awesome. Okay, so you just, by the way, you're totally in touch with the divine because you just channeled 2 things. You ready? You're going to love this. I want to validate you, not that I need to. I validate you every day. You're here. You're resurrected. Is that you said to me, be the best person you can. Jesus told me, be the love you were created to be. He told me that a year ago. I was like, wow, that's really pretty. You almost identically said that. The second thing he told me when I was over there with him, through the big things, the small things would be done, and through the small things, as he said, through the big thing, the small things would be acknowledged. Through the small things, bigger things would be accomplished. So you said almost the same thing. So I'm like totally touched right now because you totally channeled like part of my life.
Wow.
You're tapped into the divine, and I'm going, she has no idea she's saying this. I was like blown away, going, oh my God, you're like channeling my life.
Yeah,
That's what I was told, what you just said. So that's a good spiritual tip, because this is what they told me.
Before I ever do any of these talks, I actually talk to God and say, you know what, just put the words in my mouth and let me be the voice, and then I'll be happy to say whatever you say. And one time I was actually I was introducing Dr. Eben Alexander at an event with 900 people in the audience, and I realized when I was sitting up on the stage that I had forgotten the paper and forgotten to write up the information that I needed to say to introduce him about his background, his bio, etc. I'd left it. I'd forgotten it. And I just sat there and I sent a prayer up and I said, going to have to help me in this one. I don't have the slightest idea what I'm supposed to say, so please. And I went up there, and to me, I was saying blah 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 blah. That's what it sounded like I was saying. But then I got to watch the video that they did of that event, and people came to me afterwards and said, "Oh my gosh, your introduction was so awesome!" And I was thinking, okay, good, because God did it. And then I listened to the, video that they did, and I went, wow, there's no way that I knew that stuff that I said. There's no way that I was ever that beautiful with how I could introduce someone. And I just knew that it was him touching in my life in that moment, and I just made me feel so happy to know that when I ask, they're always listening and never have a question about. And sometimes when we ask for things, we're not meant to have them, and maybe wouldn't be the best for us. And I've had a couple of situations where I saw that after the fact that, oh, I'm glad I didn't get what I was asking for, because that would have been traumatic. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so we know it's interesting how we just have to let go and let God. Yeah, that's it.
And so that's a great third thing, is surrender and trust, because our team is always there, willing to help us, and what we always want is not necessarily in our highest good, because we can't see the outcome of, boy, that could have been a disaster.
That's
so
exactly
we have to trust that we are loved, and to allow God to work in our lives. Again, it's a big team.
Yep.
What's going on? And I think people get too hung up sometimes about, well, who's on the team? I'm like, they're holy. I don't know them all. I mean, angels, well, who's the guides? I think, we don't need to get hung up on that. We just need to worry about us and our relationship with the divine. We don't need to get hung up on details.
And saying thank you. And being
gratitude. Absolutely. Well, we're both here, and I'm grateful you're here, and I'm really grateful that God brought you back twice, and you've got a lot to really say, and I love your stories, and I love your humor. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
You're a delight. Thank you.
You are too, and I love you. Giving you kisses.
Kisses and namaste.
Thank you, sweetie.
Bye-bye.